Hello and welcome back to the Astrology Show, where we weave the transits of the week into the lunar phases of the current lunar cycle. I'm your host, Sarah Paasch, and this week we're going to dive into the first quarter moon phase of this Gemini lunar cycle. We begin this lunar phase on Monday, June 2nd, with the moon in Virgo. A reminder that the first quarter lunar phase is the phase of trial and error. If this Gemini New Moon cycle is all about curiosity and exploration and expansion of ideas and connections, this first quarter lunar phase with the moon in Virgo is going from curiosity and questions into a stage of development and improvement. The moon in Virgo is here to help us apply these ideas into form and function. It's here to organize the pieces that are starting to come into the picture. Now we get to find what place they might fit into or what doesn't work. And really, this is, again, trial and error through new action. So keep in mind with the Virgo moon in the beginning of this week, we're looking to test things out that have to do with development of the idea, the function of the idea, and improvement of the idea. This leads us into Wednesday, June 4th. On Wednesday, the moon is going to shift into Libra. And it just so happens that that same day, Venus in Aries is making an incredibly sweet sextile to Jupiter in Gemini. Both Venus and Jupiter in astrology are the benefics. They are the good bringers. And when they come together in an aspect like a sextile, generosity breeds more generosity. The benefics are here. They're working together. This is the collaboration of all good things. And bringing Venus and Jupiter together in a sextile in the sign of Aries and Gemini, I was getting this image of a jumpstart of benefactors, a jumpstart of blessings that come in. A way that we can really leverage the Venus-Jupiter sextile on Wednesday is to leverage community. If the Gemini New Moon is starting to expand your vision, your ideas, your collaborators and connections, this sextile is a great opportunity to take that and put it into action through a grassroots launch. It's not about waiting to have everything perfectly set up. I actually have a perfect example. One of my coaching clients right now is up to really exciting things in her business development. And she's been invited to be a vendor, to have a booth at a local expo with all the people doing all the kinds of works that totally synergize with the work that she's doing in the world. This is amazing. And it was so funny because part of her thought, I don't think I want to do it. It feels like there's so much busy work. We started talking about it. And she was getting really caught up in having the perfect booth set up. And I asked her, I said, okay, let's just consider these two options. Let's say you do the expo and you get the booth, but you just show up. You have absolutely nothing prepared, nothing on your table. It's just you. Okay. The other option is you don't go. You don't go because you don't have any of these materials. You don't have all the bells and whistles for the booth for the expo. Which one, honestly, is the bigger risk or the bigger loss? And it was very obvious in that moment in the conversation that not having the booth at all, not even showing up, would be the bigger loss. And so it was really fun. We got to completely transform this opportunity from something that felt exhausting or overwhelming or like it's going to take way too much work and I'm going to need to do way too much to prepare into this really exciting adventure and experiment to put herself out there in a new circle, in a new community, to meet other like-minded people who are also up to really exciting things in the local community, and to realize that if even just one significant connection or conversation came out of that event, she's already winning. She's already gained something of value and something more than what she had before the event, or that she would have had she not gone to the event at all. So this is a great moment to just kind of question if there's any opportunities that are sitting at your doorstep and you're like, oh, I'm not quite ready. The idea is not fully polished. I don't have the bells and whistles ready. This is your moment to question if maybe it's a little bit of an upper limit that's keeping you from actually expanding in a way that could be really exciting. I use the word upper limit. If you're curious on what that's about, it actually comes from the book The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. As a coach, it is one of my all-time recommendations and references for anybody who's interested. It's a really easy read. The theory is super easy to understand and apply. And it's really fun to play with in your own life and just kind of test it out. So highly recommend that book. We've acknowledged that we're going to make the most of Wednesday, that we're not going to waste any opportunities or invitations that could become blessings just because we feel like we might not be ready. We're going to put ourselves out there. We're going to say yes, and we're going to leave ourselves open to see what could come of it. And then on Thursday, June 5th, we've got Mercury in Gemini making a sextile to Mars in Leo. This is being bold and asking the difficult questions. This is about not being afraid to express your ideas boldly and loudly. Another great way that we can use and work with this Mercury-Mars sextile on Thursday is to learn Mercury through action, Mars. This is about being in that state of innocence and fun and curiosity and just putting yourself out there in a new way and getting new feedback that delivers our ability to move forward with that decision precision. It also might be that there's this sense of wanting to hit the ground running with our ideas. Like there's a sense of confidence to really engage in taking that inspired action that propels us forward on our path to bringing these ideas further in their development, further in their improvement phase. This Mercury Mars is also boosting our confidence to reach out to different networks or different people and to really share our ideas or to really share what we're up to. This is like having a business card and posting it everywhere in your local community. On Thursday, definitely don't miss the opportunity to get into some conversations or to reach out to people that you've previously been afraid to reach out to. We can leverage that Mars and Leo to boost our confidence. Even if there's a part of us that's not quite quote unquote ready, act like you are. Own it before you truly 100% believe it and take the risk on your ideas. This has the potential to push us forward in really fun and exciting ways. Later on Thursday, Venus is going to enter Taurus. Venus will be transiting through the sign of Taurus through July 4th of this summer. And this is a really big boost for Venus because now Venus goes into her own sign, her domicile, her place of dignity. And Venus in Taurus, she feels at home. She is like, oh, babe, I know what I'm doing here. I know what I want. I know what feels good. And Venus in Taurus, starting on Thursday night, this is when we really start to recognize where we want to put our energy, our resources for quality investments. We start focusing on bringing beauty and pleasure and comfort into the quality of our new forms and routines and structures. Venus in Taurus is going to help us slow down. The more we're willing to slow down and receive the help of Venus in Taurus for the next month, the more we're going to be really embodying that energy of abundance and worth and value. Venus in Taurus doesn't go chase what she wants. She rests. She settles down. She is the earth goddess in which all things magnetize towards her because she is so crystal clear what it is she wants, what makes her feel good. So start to tap into this Venus and Taurus energy and this sense of how and where can I start to feel myself settling in? And in what way can I start making quality investments, like getting a few quality investment pieces that every time that I look at those investment pieces, I magnify, I attract more of that energy towards me, more of that quality and that standard of this new reality that I'm building towards me, with me. Even though everything else seems to be moving really fast and it's really exciting, all the change that's kind of happening and opening, this Venus in Taurus, the thing I really love and that I'm going to remember and leverage while we've got her in Taurus for the next month is this power of waiting, this willingness to not settle for the things that might fill the space sooner, but they don't actually satisfy the true level of standard of desire and pleasure and beauty and comfort that we want to build in the future. So don't be afraid to wait for the perfect investment, for the perfect quality piece. Trust that if you want it and it's truly in your highest and best, it's meant to be yours and it will come to you. You won't have to chase it down. It'll come to you as you settle back and embody this knowingness. Like, hell yeah, I know what I want and I know it's coming to me. And I'm not settling for anything less. All right, let's keep going because this first quarter lunar phase week ends with a bang. We've got a lot happening on Sunday, June 8th and Monday, June 9th, the final days of this lunar phase. And we're going to try to break them down piece by piece while also recognizing them as a collective whole to the story that's unfolding right now. Starting on Sunday, June 8th, Mercury is going to make a conjunction to Jupiter in Gemini at 29 degrees, the last degree of Gemini. This is something you definitely want to work with. We're in Gemini. Mercury rules Gemini. So that gives us a boost of potential baked into this transit that we really don't want to let pass us by. On its own as a standalone transit, this Mercury-Jupiter is the perfect moment to put something into writing, to use if you have anything important that you need to communicate or a contract that you need to negotiate. A phrase that I invite you to hold while you're working with this Mercury conjunct Jupiter on Sunday is the answer's always no unless you ask. This transit wants you, double dog dares you to ask. So if you have something to share, to communicate, to ask, this is a moment to use it. And now we need to weave this transit into the bigger story unfolding. When I talk about the whole picture unfolding that these transits are participating in, what I'm referring to really is the squares that each planet that enters into Cancer in the coming weeks are going to make to both Saturn and Neptune in Aries. I've been imagining this as a team meeting, like a company is having a major executive board meeting for new building plans that are about to begin. And right now, Mercury being the first planet that's going to enter into the room and sit at the table with Saturn and Neptune, Mercury gets a chance to have this conversation with Jupiter and get all of the details so that Mercury can take all of these messages, all this information, all this data, and bring it into the board meeting. Mercury is getting some messages from Jupiter around how the ideas of this Gemini new moon or the changes or new connections that have started to come into form during this Gemini new moon cycle, how have these expanded? What's needed for future growth? Also considering how does this play into the things that the Saturn and Neptune in Aries is going to require before beginning to actually build the dreams into reality. It's taking all of the ideas and the reconstruction that's been happening between Jupiter and Saturn and those squares when Jupiter was in Gemini and Saturn was in Pisces. And now as we go into the square coming with Cancer and Aries, now we're about to initiate new building plans. It's a whole new building that we're going to start working on. And this gives Mercury, the messenger, the opportunity to set an agenda for this meeting. Mercury is going to bring all of the relevant pieces of information and conversation that need to be addressed before we call to order the official meeting of Jupiter and Cancer square Saturn and Neptune and Aries. We are collecting data and we are going to present it to the board in this lunar cycle. So make sure that you're tapping into both the Mercury and Jupiter piece on its own, as well as paying attention to and being open and receptive to the data and the information that Mercury is bringing into that whole picture, that executive board meeting. So on Monday, June 9th, in addition to Mercury and Cancer making those squares to Saturn and Neptune and Aries, we've also got Venus and Taurus making a square to Pluto in Aquarius. Whenever we have Venus, Pluto together, it's always intense, especially for our relationships and social contracts. Venus square Pluto is likely on Monday to unearth some honest feelings, and baked into the honest feelings that are being unearthed is actually the clarity of the standard that Venus has around what it is that she requires for all of her exchanges, what it is that needs to be considered when we consider our standard of desire, our standard of relationship and exchange. This moment between Venus and Pluto is confronting us to really name and communicate what it is that we really aren't willing to sacrifice. And how can not just knowing that, but naming it and being willing to talk about it actually inform our choices of participation? How can that inform the compromises that we will or will not make in our collaborations or in any sort of investments and exchanges? A square from Pluto always absolutely requires us to have a greater sensitivity to the emotional environment within us and around us. This is a day that we really benefit when we leave room for everybody's feelings to be valid and heard. This is about confronting with absolute honesty and courage how we both feel and what we both need and what needs to change in order for us both to have those feelings and needs met. And knowing that the invitation when we choose to work with Pluto is focusing on the direction of evolution that Pluto's inviting us into. Pluto is telling us this strategy is not going to continue to work. It's not necessarily saying this relationship or this entire plan isn't going to work, but it is saying you can't keep doing it the way you've done it in the past. And focusing on the hurt of recognizing what didn't work in the past isn't going to feed the evolution or the construction of moving forward either. The square needs us to evolve our ability to honor and recognize both sides of this square. On the one hand, we need to acknowledge and evolve the consideration of Venus and Taurus of this new standard of our feelings and needs being considered in any of our strategies going forward. And we also need to evolve our strategy to consider Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is empowering the creation and expansion of any system or group that's really taking into consideration the equality and the fairness of everybody. We need to get out of any kind of hierarchical system where there's one person who comes out on top and everybody else suffers. Pluto in Aquarius in this square is not going to reward anybody who comes from that place that leans too heavily on their Venus and Taurus standard of my feelings and my needs. And again, keeping that whole picture in mind, this is more information that we can bring into that board meeting that we're going to have between Jupiter and Saturn before the building plans actually start breaking ground. And to top off Monday's final day of this lunar phase, we all get the help we've been waiting for. On Monday night, June 9th, Jupiter is going to officially enter into Cancer. Not only do we have help with Jupiter in Cancer, we have help with high esteem. Jupiter moves from being in detriment in Gemini, struggling to really get its message across or to get its ideas into focus. But now Jupiter is moving into a sign where it's exalted and it excels. Jupiter in Cancer is not only going to help us grow and nurture in that Cancerian way our ideas through every phase of development, but also going to bring this Jupiterian gift of cohesion. So now that we've got Jupiter in Cancer, if we come back to that whole picture, we come back to that exec board meeting that we were talking about, now it's like this outside help, this expert that we've hired has entered the room. And this expert has this incredible ability as they join the meeting to advise and mediate between Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Aries, the things they feel in conflict with on how we're going to start building these dreams. Jupiter is here to help us optimize growth with a fresh outside perspective. The good thing to remember is that Jupiter in Cancer is going to have to start this transit with that tough executive board meeting to really dive into that conversation with Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Aries. And there's going to be things we're going to have to work through. There's going to be things we're going to have to consider and reorganize or restructure before we start breaking ground on these building plans. However, Jupiter is going to be in Cancer through June 30th, 2026. And because Jupiter is making these squares in the very beginning of the Jupiter in Cancer transit, that means if we show up to the meeting of these squares to Saturn and Neptune and we put in the work, we have the difficult conversations, we say, yes, I'm willing to show up and take on responsibility the ways that you're requiring of me, then Jupiter moves forward and is completely free to do the good it wants to do. And so as we end this week and this first quarter lunar phase, we really want to hold in our minds and in our hearts that the remainder of this lunar cycle is still so much about gathering of data, what it is that we need to bring into consideration, bringing into the meeting and the conversations that are going to happen in the next few weeks. And then once we move through that meeting and those conversations, and we really allow that time of consideration of all of these different pieces of information, this is going to lead to the moment where we actually put things into action. When we get to the Cancer new moon at the end of this month, we're going to be able to start breaking ground together. And the growth that's coming is going to be more optimized. It's going to be more cohesive. And it's going to have this really powerful resource of a whole new level and standard of collaboration. Get excited because next week we go to the Sagittarius full moon. This full moon is when the Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune meeting is officially called to order. We're going to be here next week to talk all about that Sagittarius full moon, the benefits that are coming in some of the transits, and also the ways that we can prepare ourselves to set ourselves up for success. So you know what to do. You got to subscribe to this channel, turn the notifications on, and that way you know that you're not going to miss any of the juicy astrology details for next week's full moon episode. And if you're somebody who's like, I really want to know how this affects me more, what's happening in my chart with these transits, and what are they inviting me into? How can I prepare myself? How can I make the most of them? This is the perfect time to book that one-on-one reading. My books are open. That is linked below for you here. And again, my name is Sarah Paasch, and thank you so much for being here this week on this week's episode of the Astrology Show, where we weave the transits into the lunar phases. If you like this channel, if you want to support this channel, it means so much if you could like, subscribe, leave comments. And I'm so curious, since Saturn just moved into Aries last Saturday on May 24th, has anybody started to feel that shift? Comment below and tell me, #Saturn in Aries, if you're already feeling it. What are you feeling? Leave your comment below. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you next week for the full moon in Sagittarius. Woo!